looking for a working title, but we cannot name the podcast The Business of Theater. There's always something.
Well, it's about as close as we're going to get, Darnell.
We have to go back to all of our recordings to figure out the
Yeah,
closest we've gotten.
yeah,
They are good working titles. Just I'm not feeling that one.
yeah.
I think it's
It's not a happy title.
no, I think it's funny that we're 4 seasons in and
Yeah,
we're still
it's
trying to find the working title.
yeah. Well, it would be nice, we can steal from other people, but you and I don't do that, do we?
No.
You know.
Yeah, so this is the work. No, it isn't. This is the business. This is the business of theater, a working title. I'm Darnell Radford,
I'm Mitch Weiss.
and let's get down to business. So I was scrolling through our feed roll, of the various news that's going on, and it's so interesting. I was thinking about, we're not a theater podcast that gushes about the celebrities and what they've done. Um, we love Audra McDonald, but we're not spending every minute talking about what Audra said, what Audra did at the show. Although we love Audra, and if you want to come on the show, I'm very happy to have you. Um, it's just interesting because there's so much space for that, to talk about the love of these elements of Broadway. But here we're talking about the business,
That's
and
right.
there's so many elements of the business that aren't on the surface, and so it's like we know these things happen, but sometimes conversations like this give us a little bit more insight and sort of allow us to understand, oh, so it is it is a struggle. Oh, it does take a village. Oh, there is always something, these things that come up.
And there are a lot of people who are in their guts. They're aware that these issues are exist and are important, but they don't know all the ramifications. And sometimes there's no one to talk to about it. I
Yeah.
found that a lot when I was working in regional theater. The artistic director, I'm managing director, and we're sitting there, and it's like, I want to have dinner with you and talk about the larger issue, not just whether or not a particular prop is
Hmm.
arriving when it's supposed to,
Yeah.
right? There's something larger than that. Why are we even doing this damn play with a prop, right? Is other than you liked it,
Yeah.
right? And why do our first three audiences only have half an audience?
Hmm.
Shouldn't we be discussing that? Oh, I get it. You're too busy worrying about the next play.
Yeah.
So I can't bring it up. So you and I get this opportunity to bring up things that should have been discussed 100 times over.
Absolutely. And so there's a lot of things going on, like regionally, for example, for the past month and kind of leading into June, we will start seeing season announcements. We'll start seeing what theaters have planned for next season if we haven't already been made aware of that. And these are just things. It's like on top of like our season not even finished, and we're early promoting. We're not even early promoting. We're like we have to promote the next season in the middle of the current season because we have to let people know what's coming so that they can plan. We have to announce a subscription for the following season, and we do an early bird or something, like some discount or leap of faith or something to get people to buy into that season before we get into that season. And there's so much that we're trying to do ahead of time, and so then we return to like, well, what do people think about the current shows that you have on stage? And then we get back to the press and how the press
Mm,
covers us, and how the press is very helpful in moving our conversation forward. Whether they agree or disagree, it is an integral part of the conversation that we're having. But for some companies, are relying heavily on that review to get more people into the theater to be a part of the conversation. And so it's just interesting that there's a way for us to encourage and entice people to join us in this conversation before the press gets involved. But then there's also a subset of patrons of theater lovers who are waiting for the press to chime in on their
Right.
part of the conversation.
Well, and similarly, I'm one of those people that, uh, even as part of the industry, I may not wait for a critic, but I'm going to wait for a friend to have seen it first. And I want to
Mhm.
have that word of mouth saying, this is what I felt, even if it was a preview.
Yeah.
And that, then I interpret it as that sounds good, but it's not the kind of thing I usually like to sit through for 3 hours.
Hmm.
Or if someone says, well, it was okay, but there was this one part that was phenomenal and the show's only 80 minutes long, that combination can sway me that a critic doesn't write about.
Yeah.
And plus, I will say that, well, we're lucky. I don't know if that's the right word. We have a lot of critics in New York, including from out of town. You go to regional theater, you may only have one or two, and they may have no credentials that make their opinion any better than my aunt who has never seen a single piece of theater.
Yeah.
Right? She's going to go, well, I wasn't entertained by that. And I'm going, best critique I've read so far. Right? And, but these critics go in, they're like, they went to graduate school to that the writing is more important and they're worried about how they sound and whether they describe the plot in poetic terms. And it's like, no, I want to know, do I see this show or not? Um, and that to me is a problem with critics. However, it's a good backup. If you get in New York, if we get 10 critics all saying the same thing, that's
Hmm.
that's encouraging,
Yeah.
right? Although the New York Times is problematic at all turns.
I mean, the New York Times said that Smash lives up to its name.
Yep. And yet, and you and I know this, I don't want to say everyone else disagreed, but but a lot of people disagreed. And
Yeah.
I don't want to, I don't want to hurt any show. If it's entertainment, they put a lot of money in it. There's great talent on stage.
Hmm.
God bless it. Somebody's going to love it. It doesn't have to be me.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited. I was excited that they were developing it for the stage because there was just, the whether you love or hated the series, it felt like there something was missing. Like there was more to this story that it'd be nice to hear or see. And there's a lot of things that came out of it that, like, if you went in this direction, I think I would have been, and more people would have been interested. I don't know. We don't know.
Well,
But the
yeah,
fact that they
you want a critic over here, Mitch, says from the TV show, there was a lot missing from the TV show. Any sense of reality. There is more drama in putting a Broadway show on than they ever could have put into a TV show. And they made up stories instead of using real ones. And that annoyed me tremendously. I don't need a soap opera. There's more drama. Tell them what's actually happening on some of these shows. It's exciting. And instead, I'm sitting there going, oh, this just looks like it's General Hospital.
I wonder if I know, but we hadn't seen a theater version of General Hospital, you know?
Well, I said for some people, it's great.
Yeah.
But
I just thought, by it being there, it was enough for someone to say yes, but or yes and like I wanted more. I wanted, like, what, they tried with Smash, but now um here's thank you five or
well, all right.
something.
While we're being critics, because I want to support a couple of things. Even though I just saw the movie again on television. A Death Becomes Her,
Hmm.
and I was, as much as I like the idea of it, the movie bored me. Let's just put it that way. There were parts that were very funny, but it bored me. The musical did not.
Hmm.
The musical is funny from the minute the two ladies walk on stage.
Hmm.
And that helps when they're singing, which of course the movie didn't have either. Right. So again, this is my personal opinion, but here, it's like you talk about Smash. I'm going, but Death Becomes Her, which again, is not earth-shattering story. It's fantasy, and I had a really fun time there.
Mhm.
Um, I haven't seen Boop yet. I've seen some serious drama lately, which I liked. The nice thing about theater, which I will always return to, is the variety.
Mm.
I like being able to walk into something and saying, this is a revival of a 1969 drama that may be a little dated, but wow, it reminds me of what I was thinking in those days and how I felt. And the acting is superb because God bless all these actors. It usually is,
Mm.
right? And I should name it Ceremonies in Dark Old Men, which is from 1969, I think. It's starring Norm Lewis, a
Mhm.
Broadway star, and he's wonderful. And the cast is spectacular, and it's old, but it's has a message that you walk out feeling. And I'm thinking, what's the latest drama I've seen that makes me walk out feeling? And it's hard to bring that up. I mean,
Mhm.
there are a couple, but mostly they're kind of intellectual. I have not. I haven't seen everything now. That's why I always hesitate about critiquing. And
Mhm.
I could not nominate for the Tony Awards. I haven't seen enough stuff. All right, so I can't. I can't do that.
I think I want to start a website called Real Theater Reviews, right? But it's just somebody from the theater. Like,
Yeah.
what'd you
Well,
think of the show? I fell asleep twice, but I
no,
still gave a
th-
standing ovation.
but that's called testimonials.
I know.
That it's a whole form of television commercial, which one, if you ever see them for the Torch Song Trilogy, uh, the best testimonial commercial on television ever. For one, it's the cheapest to do because you have a play, and you don't have a lot of money to spend on commercials when you have a drama. It's not like a musical. And I remember they went through and people were just saying, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. This is wonderful. And they ended with a lady who said, I'm from out of town. I came in, I have seen 6 shows this week. And by far, this is the only one I would rush back to see again. And the reason it resonated is because everyone I know who had gone to see Torch Song Trilogy on Broadway felt the same way. So it was repeating what I already had heard. And therefore, people were walking out of there going, yeah, I agree with her, as opposed to you're trying to talk me into going. So things like that. But Darnell, you and I have talked about this a lot. Every show is different. Every
Mhm.
theater is different. You cannot come up with just one way to market something. You have to look at the play, who the audience for that. Then you have to look at who's the audience for the theater that they're going to. Is it Broadway? Is it Theater Exile? Is it in the middle of Indianapolis? Where is it? Actors Theater of Louisville? What are you doing? A black drama, or are you doing a really white comedy, or are you doing something from 1942? You can't market these things the same way,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And then do you have a star? Denzel Washington could stand on a stage and say, I will sign 100 autographs for the first people in the front row, and 1,000 people would show up and pay $1,000. You don't even need the play. And I hate to break that to him because he is a wonderful actor, but it's a shame. You're seeing Othello and going, yeah, I could see it in Central Park for free during the summer at Free Shakespeare in Central Park, and they'll have Morgan Freeman instead of Denzel. That's okay. It's Othello. Anyway, I digress,
Yeah.
don't I?
No, this is all good.
Yeah.
um, yeah, but it's you're right. It is. There's so many different avenues, and depending on who's in your marketing office, like they're everybody's not able to check every box. You know what I mean? Like, you might have a marketing person who's been at it for 30 years.
Hmm.
right? But they don't understand like zennials,
Right. Oh, absolutely.
and so like they were successful in terms of like getting people in, let's say before the pandemic, and the reason they're not as successful is because the people they were reaching made changes in that time frame, and they may have moved, or they may
Right.
have you know realigned their values, and something else matters more, and so they're not as frequent, or they've changed their level of support, or all kinds of things like that. And so you have to like continuously mainline what's new about marketing, to sort of understand how to reach people today. And then there's people who are just actively resisting anything that's out there, to like trying to get their attention. And so that makes it hard too. And like I always say, I'm not trying to make fanfare out of coming to the show. I do make a note that I have been to the show,
Hmm.
and that doesn't help the producer. you know, the producer doesn't.
Well, it just helps with branding that there are people who are not in the theater who don't even pay attention. At
Yeah.
least somebody will notice the play exists.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what you do is valuable that way.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it isn't valuable. I'm just saying it's different. And so, you know, um, I think that that's why it's so tough right now. It's like it would be, not that we've ever been in a world like this, but it would be interesting if we were in a world where we just put on the work, and
Yeah.
and then people found it.
But Darnell, isn't that both the blessing and the problem with college? Because in college, when a department decides to put on a play, the actors, the crew, all they don't have to know about, are we getting an audience?
Yeah.
They don't have to know about whether or not the show is good.
Hmm.
They don't have to know about anything other than I went to class and now I'm in rehearsal.
Yeah.
And that's a very bad education for what the real world in theater is.
Yeah, I definitely remember in high school, doing those shows. We worked so hard after school, during rehearsals, building sets, like while they're trying to work on tough scenes on the stage, like all this
Mhm.
stuff is happening to bring this together for about 4 nights. You know,
You had 4 nights, we had two.
yeah, it was like it seemed like we always opened on a Thursday and it always rained. So I don't know if that was good luck for us that it was going to rain, but it always rained on a Thursday. But when you think about it, it's because the school only has one theater group, you know, and they only produce one show a season. Like there's one in the fall and there's one in the spring. And there's something about it where people just show up. Like we never thought
No, no,
about.
no, no, no. It's parents and family. Give me a
Well,
break.
yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. But I'm
yeah.
saying like we never thought about, we were never concerned about who was in the audience.
Never.
We were just concerned about we are performing in front of an audience. But when we looked out there, it was a full house.
Yeah.
Because
Even if it wasn't.
yeah, because but also it was like it's so concentrated. It's like your kids are in this show. That's why you're here.
Hmm.
Um, like you're representatives of the school and you have kids. You bring your kids to the show. Something like all those things. The point is we didn't do any marketing,
Right.
but we got people in. Uh, and you're right. It is kind of a sobering, and it's sort of like it's not a good lesson, when you understand that. Because I used to say, I I was like, so theater is the same as it was in high school, except I know how much everything costs now.
Ah,
It's like I wasn't aware of the money. I knew we had money, but we weren't sitting around talking
and
about the
and
money.
there's another, and how much pre-production
Hmm.
is involved,
Yeah.
because even the theater teachers in high school and college, they don't have to spend the amount of preparation that you and I have to
Y-
spend.
Yeah.
And we're not even doing Broadway. Broadway, you have to start raising that money years
Yeah.
ahead.
before you can tell anybody you're doing anything. Yeah.
Right. And some of that means that the person who wrote it is waiting all those years
Hmm.
only to find out, oh, it has to be rewritten anyway,
Mm.
right? And then after it opens, it's a flop. Come on, right? Why am I giving up years of my life for this?
Something in society changed last year, and now you have to rewrite it. Like, we can't say that anymore.
Actually,
Don't put that in your new show.
what's interesting, this, we have a show that we're developing that has moments of ICE
Hmm.
immigration
Yeah.
in it, written long before all the turmoil about sending people back to, um, sending them out of the country, picking
Hmm.
them up off the street, long before all that. That means the play now is more about ICE, which it never was.
Hmm.
So now the author is looking at it. How do I make the show still about what I intended to write about
Hmm.
so it doesn't come across as I wrote this as a political statement?
Yeah. And what's interesting about it, like, even though, yeah, ICE is more elevated now, ICE would have been a part of the conversation anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
But
but the balance of how I mean, look, Long Day's Journey into Night has alcoholism in it,
mhm,
but you don't walk around saying it's a play about alcoholism.
yeah.
And that's where you have to balance it, right? It has to be, is the intent of the writer and the storyline, which is not around ICE, coming through, even though there's a moment of immigration issues in the play,
Yeah. And
right?
if so, if you don't want to let go of the elements of that in the piece, is there anything you can add around it that sort of
Right.
neutralizes it or just makes it less of a, you know, of a primary topic?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that stuff, it's so interesting because that is problem solving. It's also like a fun exercise, kind of like, how do I take these elements and how do I downplay this element, or how do I raise uh, this element of the story with a few lines? Do I need a whole new scene, or do I cut something? Um, yeah.
And what does the press office and the marketing people and the ad office and the person who's designing the poster and everyone else about it, what do what are they told? How
Hmm.
does the script change for them?
Yeah.
I did want to bring up just examples of how extreme different marketing can be,
Hmm.
and what I want to use what I consider to be both the best and worst example in one. Um, the um, the producer Garth Drabinsky, who has been in jail because of some dealings with his investors. So
Hmm.
we're going to leave his name, but he's an important producer for the particular show, which was Ragtime. And what he did for Ragtime, which in my opinion is a magnificent musical, um, he started promoting the show more than a half a year before the show even went into rehearsal. And I don't mean he put a little ad in the New York Times. This is prior to the internet, by the way. So no internet. This is just, you have to take an ad in the paper or nothing. And at the time, the Sunday New York Times was it. That's what had the biggest viewership for people deciding what theater they were going to see on
Mm.
Broadway. He took out double page, full color ads every Sunday for at least half a year. Now, you do the math considering, and I don't want to put an exact price on it, but let's put that a page in full color in the New York Times on the Sunday was approximately $100,000 each page.
Mm.
And we're talking about, oh, what year was this? Same year as Lion King. Lion King's 25 years old, so that gives
92.
90 something. It was 90 something. So think about inflation, different prices. He's now spending $100,000 to $200,000 a week, 6 months before a show. You do the math. How is that show ever going to break even? In those days, you could put on a show for a couple of $1,000,000. So now he's spending the entire budget. Now he sold a lot of tickets because it looked spectacular. It had its own image, and there's no show yet. So you talk about critic-proof. I mean, the argument would be he really could have waited for the critics because everyone loved it, right? But what if they didn't love it? The idea is, can we make a show critic-proof? One show that was critic-proof was Cats. Cats was a giant hit in the West End in London, and they decided to bring it here. And at the time, it had the largest advanced box office sales of any Broadway show ever. I believe, and again, forgive me if I got my numbers wrong, I believe they had $8 million in the bank before they opened the box office. And the show itself, again, it was less than $8 million. So it's automatically going to break even and pay its investors back. Nobody has to come, and it's going to pay its investors back.
Yeah.
And then, of course, at that point, the reputation is, oh my God, it's a sold out hit. Oh my God, we can't get tickets because look at the advance. Oh my God, it's going to take months to even get in the theater. So by the time the critics reviewed it, which was not, they did not get good reviews. By the time the critics nobody cared. The tickets were sold for 6 months, a year into the run. And that meant that you just ignore the critics. The audience is telling you ought to go see this. Everyone keep buying tickets at full price. And it continued to run and became the longest running musical on Broadway for a while, for many, 20-something years.
Ragtime's first production was in Toronto in 96 and on Broadway in 98.
98, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's more than 25 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I had that part correct.
Yes.
And you got to forgive me. This is not me reading about it. This is because I lived through this.
Yeah.
Right? So, but there are two different ways to become critic-proof. You spend a lot of money, or you open it somewhere else and you create hype. You can do the same thing by saying Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal are going to be in Othello. You're done. Now, the other process, and I worked for a producer who believed in this process. He spent next to nothing on advertising before a show opened. He said, it's either going to get great reviews and people will come see it, or it's not. And even if I get some advanced sales, I'm not going to be able to keep the show running long if it doesn't get good reviews. So why spend all that money up front? Fascinating education for me to work with all these different concepts of marketing. If you have the money, God bless you, go spend it if that's what you want to do. But the other way to say is I'm going to keep the budget as low as possible, take my chances with the critics and the word of mouth, and see if anybody shows up.
Yeah.
Both can work, right? Stop me if I'm just going on. Equus, the original Equus, which I also luckily got to work on. The very first ad in the Sunday New York Times, for those of you who have seen it, the logo for Equus, the original, if you look it up on Google, it's fascinating. It is like a puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle, that when you put the pieces together, it looks like a horse. But all they did for the first 3 weeks of ads, and it was a small ad, they put the puzzle, the horse looking like a puzzle, with no words in the arts and leisure section. No one knew what the hell they were talking about. But you know what? By the second week, everyone I knew on the street was asking, did you see that? What does that mean? No one knew the show was even coming.
Yeah.
And by the fourth week, they put the name Equus on top of it. And then the fifth week, I think, they put the name of the theater. So they spent very little, but they got a bang for their buck.
Like watching it come together over
Right.
time in the marketing.
Which also is the theme of Equus. It's a puzzle.
Yeah.
Right? Why does this boy blind 6 horses in England?
Yeah.
That's the puzzle. But, and God bless the guy who, I forget his name now. He was a wonderful graphic designer who put the poster together. It was his, they ran to the races with it, as they say. So these are just amazing different options, and there's so many more. So then you hit a theater company, Barrington Stage in Massachusetts, Theater Exile in Philly, La Jolla in California. I don't think any of them have the same marketing schemes. They all run differently.
I will say, and somebody in regional theater, I dare you to prove me wrong. When things get tough, the marketing budget is compromised.
Mm-hmm.
And it is why I'd rather let go of everyone and have the marketing. Like you can't sacrifice your marketing. And every time it's always like, well, and the conversations are tough. It's like, keep the lights on or keep our marketing director. I don't know. And there's always a thought that you can piecemeal or you can Frankenstein together a marketing plan. And you really do need somebody who knows what they're doing.
That's the key. You just said you are talking truth there.
Mm-hmm.
It is, you can throw money at any problem, or you can hold money from any problem. But if you don't know what you're doing,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, you can't go from like you had a marketing director to now you don't have one, and you think that your team in-house can just figure it out. Like that's not, just because
the artistic director takes it on him or herself and says, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. Well, based on what?
Yeah. It's that's always interesting. But for instance, like I argue all the time about like we need the look of this show as early as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just keep saying like, here's our show, because it's an impression that they're trying to connect themselves to. So if you want to have, images and items in the graphic of your show, like you got to have them as early as possible. You can't wait, because I think what people tend to do is like we have what's called a placeholder graphic, at the beginning of our season, because our team isn't fully in place. Like our designer is not working on the third show's, materials necessarily as our planning team has finalized the season. And so we're putting something out there, but it's generic and it's not enough for them to attach themselves to it. It's always interesting how a press release works. There's a reason you don't send it to the public, and it doesn't have material. It doesn't have graphics in it. It's a later email that the press gets of press photos and so on. It's like, so to support the stories we hope you're going to tell about us, here's this. But that's generic because it's just information. It's because the press needs to put it on their calendar so they can think about it. The press needs to know it's happening so that they can tie it together with everything else that's going on. Sometimes the themes of your show, like if you're producing Equus and there's a grand dressage tournament that's coming to town, like, Equus is going to get some attention and they're going to tie it to this dressage event. Yeah.
There's also the political point, which if you work in the industry, you learn early on that the press office knows who they're going to get the most from and who they are not going to get promotion from if they don't give them something special. Mm-hmm. So there used to be, you can't tell anybody when this show is opening or who's in it until I tell the New York Post or until I tell the New York Times. They have to get it at least 24 hours before anyone else, or we're going to lose an entire full page article, right? Or the critic's not going to come, or some threat. And only the people who know what they're doing know how to take advantage of that. And the
Yeah.
rest of us will just go send it out to everyone. I don't have any more time. Just let everyone know. You're kicking yourself in the butt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that even in small places. I mean, even in Barrington Stage, you don't let the minister down the road know what show you're doing in August before you let that critic know,
Yeah.
because now you're insulted, because the minister is going to spread the word by phone,
Well,
right?
here's what may be a difference when you were talking about Drabinsky and Ragtime.
Mhm.
Was Drabinsky at the time promoting any other
No,
production?
no.
And so this is the challenge for regional theaters. You're already in your season and you're
Hmm.
promoting, you're trying to get people to come see your current show, and you're also trying to let them know about something you've got coming in a year.
Right.
And so that's the part that's a little bit of a challenge, because you've got a budget for this year that's tied to this season's productions. And it's hard to get ahead of that, to
But
say like,
but Darnell, isn't that a reason? And you and I talk about this all the time, so I apologize. Isn't that a reason to say that the current nonprofit theater system is broken? And that doesn't mean everything about it. Don't get me. I'm not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but there is so much that is a common problem from theater to theater, and the theaters aren't getting together to try to help each other figure it out. Now we have the new problem where the government's not going to hand out grants, perhaps, and that things are going to dry up. We don't know where that's going. Again, where's the collective? Where are the people saying, you know what? The 10 out of 12's tech rehearsals are always a problem for our theater. How do we resolve it a different way? Or we always have trouble finding casting because we have to rehearse during this time. Maybe we should change the hours of our casting, of our rehearsals.
yeah.
And it's going to be the different answer, obviously, for different places. But you and I are doing more talking about this. Here we are bringing up what happened at the beginning. We're doing more about talking about this than I hear from other theaters. I spent today in a room with representatives of, and I don't want to, it was not the management level, but representatives of 5 major New York nonprofits. I was with them for hours. We were in an audition together. I almost felt like they had just been hired and never worked in the theater before. There were concepts there. Don't get me wrong, not all of them. It's not like I'm the genius of the group, but they seemed to just say, I was told to do this, and that's what I do. And that's all I'm doing today. And I'm going, no, here you are talking to each other. You have multi-million-dollar issues and problems. And whether it's your individual problem or not, isn't that of interest? Don't you have more to talk about? And you're in the room together. Why not? Go to lunch afterward. Right? No, they just split and went their ways. And it's not like they had to rush back to the office, because I asked them, oh, no, I'm going home now. I never went home when I was in a nonprofit, right? I wanted to stay. I wanted to work on this. I wanted to talk to this person. Anyway.
I mean, think about it. For the longest time, we've just been like, perhaps the mindset is that, oh, we're buying ads, we'll be all right. Like, they're not thinking beyond that, because it's like, like here, the Philadelphia Inquirer is the publication of note, arguably. And so there are companies who know that if they have an impression in the Sunday Inquirer, that they're going to get ticket sales from that, because there's a subset of the patronage that is still subscribed to the Philadelphia Inquirer. But for us, our thought process was that the younger audience is looking for digital resources. And so even though the Inquirer does have a website and has, digital offerings, they're behind a paywall. And so most people are not interested in paying to get on the other side of that
Right.
wall.
Right. Yeah.
And so this is often why, like, I always think about, like, how did you even read that review? It's behind a paywall. So how valuable is the review if it's behind a paywall? And so, like, the company who's trying to get a review from that publication is probably the only member. Not the only one, but
I well, and you're absolutely, but that's again where a press professional
yeah, it
is
has
going to
to
say
find
that's
it.
if we're looking for this particular kind of audience,
Mhm.
this is the one who is paying to get past the paywall. That's why we're going to try to get this paper or this blogger to come see the show and write about it.
Yeah.
It's that specific. You need people. I mean, literally, there are thousands now of people who do reviews of shows. Thousands. You have to know who's who.
Yeah.
And as a producer or as a manager or anybody or a writer, you don't have time for that to know everybody,
Mhm.
right? So you do need professionals, and you're absolutely right. Marketing gets just give it to someone that we're able to hire cheaply down the street who's kind of once worked for a newspaper,
Yeah.
right? That it's not the same thing. Um,
So I know that this question could probably fill an entire episode. But okay. So we are confirmed that we need qualified people to sit in these spaces and help us move this. But at the same time, we also have concerns about the purse of the organization and whether its funding, its resources are going to the right places. And so sometimes the conversation is about you're not putting enough of it into the art itself. It shows on the stage maybe,
and
but you
and
do need that infrastructure as well.
well, so you have brought up one of the not one. You've brought up a major problem in theater as old as prostitution in the world. It is
Tale as old as time.
it's the second oldest professional problem is
It's
marketing. First, you had the prostitutes, then you had to figure out how to let people know that they were there,
it's
right?
actually the same. It's actually the same profession.
And you're right; it is a form of prostitution. You're absolutely right. But Darnell, and we talk. That's why I said this is a common problem, even when you have a lot of money. It's a common problem. Why aren't we talking about it?
Yeah.
That I don't. If I had the answer, I would just freely say, here's my money. It's solved."
Hmm.
But then there'd be somebody else you should hire that requires money. Um, by the way, and this is not unimportant. I had a discussion with an executive in the Off Broadway League today, and fascinating. And he's going to Edinburgh, by the way, with a project, which is why the subject came up. And while we were talking about executive pay and how sometimes disgusting it is in the theater, he said, well, that is because entry level pay has not risen
Mm.
to a decent level.
Yeah.
He said, that's the problem. There are interns working for nothing still. And he didn't know this because I'm significantly older than he is, but the amount of money that you make as, let's say, I'll call it a receptionist, but it's like a production assistant in a producer's office, uh, has risen no more than $50 since I was one in 1979.
Mm.
$50 difference? And we're talking about $1,000 tickets to Denzel. Something is wrong. And that doesn't mean, certainly we know nonprofits, even the executives, some of them are struggling to pay themselves. I don't want to say it, but we also know that there are some major nonprofits here in New York where people are making more than $1 million a year. And while one could argue they do the work for it, I don't think the theater at this point, when you're bringing people in to work for free or for $100 a week and trying to live in New York City, that is not a correct balance.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so I'm not a Republican. What am I going to tell you? Um, but I get the balance. It's like, okay, executives there, it's their institution, blah blah blah. I can argue that they're worth their money, but it is always about and who's doing your work. If you got rid of those interns or your receptionists, could your office still survive? The
Mm.
answer is no. Because if it was yes, then
No.
fine, pay them nothing. You're being nice to them, but
And I
you're
think, and
you're
I think,
actually using them to take a job that somebody else could have.
yeah. And I think people forget that it is, um, that the internship is a course that they're taking.
Right.
And so it
Well,
is, but
yeah.
it's in the block of a course, but it's a class. And we're supposed to be educating them, not
Hmm.
just throwing them work that we don't have staff to do.
Well, and by I was calling it an internship, but even that first level job, you're out of college.
Hmm.
You now say, I just want to work for this producer on Broadway. I want to get my foot in the door. And they're paying you $500 a week to live in New York City and rent an apartment. That's what they paid. Well, 450 is what the worst job you could get in 1979 was.
Hmm.
That is disgusting.
Oh, and that's what I was saying. So often leaders will ask around, like they'll ask around for these going rates.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah,
everybody's talking about how they lowball everybody. And
yeah,
so they're not saying they lowball, but they hear a similar low rate, and then they all justify this as standard.
yeah. I
Yeah.
will say, and only because he's dead and because I totally idolize him. So if I say something bad, it's with love. But
Mhm.
producer Joe Papp had our management office do a report on what everyone was making in every nonprofit of a level of a certain level and above, so
Hmm.
that he felt that he was paying people at the right rate. Well, we were, because everybody was lowballing.
Yeah.
So that was the excuse when somebody was saying, but I'm an expert. I could move to a Broadway show or a film or TV studio and make 4 times this amount, but I want to stay here. But I can't afford to live in New York City with that money.
Yeah.
And because everybody else was that low, it's like, well, then you're going to have to quit. And we had plenty of money because we had a chorus line. So that wasn't the issue.
I turned out I had to pass on an opportunity with a production group in New York because they worked they worked from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah.
normal hours. And this was at the time, like, we were getting used to COVID. We were not on the other side, so to speak. And so I'd asked about hybrid because I'm in Philadelphia. So I would have to commute there for until I found something. And then it was like, yeah, we get in here at 10 and we pretty much leave at 10 o'clock. And I'm like, is there any hybrid days where anybody works from home? No. No. Like, nope, that's not how we operate. I was like,
Hmm.
so do you live in the building? In the building where your office is, or you just no? Because
Well,
still commuting around New York is still time consuming as well. If
right.
you work downtown and live in the Bronx, like, it's going to take over an hour for you to get home.
Absolutely. And I need to put a qualification on what I just said about money,
Mhm.
um, before somebody writes us or calls my bluff.
Or
Um,
comments a yawn.
when you are developing a show, as we do with my company, the amount of money you have to do the show is what means we're not pay. We pay, excuse the expression, shit for
Mm.
anybody working on our development show. Now the difference is we can't work them 10 hours. We can't work them multiple weeks. We can't, I mean, we get that, but we do pay them something, and it's embarrassing what we pay them. So I don't want to act like, oh, I'm the one paying decent salary to everyone. I'm part of the system too,
Mm.
because we're all stuck without enough money to do what our industry requires, which is why Broadway, to some extent, Broadway, that's why the unions are there. People get paid a living wage. That's all that is. However, the amount of money that they spend on these shows and building these sets, that is disgusting,
Mm.
right? This is where you just say, oh, you need a fourth yacht in your backyard, not even in the water, right? That's the kind of money that is being spent on Broadway. So again, maybe we sit down and discuss, how do we balance that? How do we say, okay, the Titanic on stage is not going to have to sink with the cost of $1 million. We find a way to do it with $500,000, and the other $500,000 is a way we make sure all of our staff is getting paid decently. I, I don't have the answer. I do know I'm embarrassed with how little I pay people when I hire them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know anybody who is patting themselves on the back about lowballing people. Like it, I feel
No.
like it happens because it's like I only have so much money. I also want to be able to prove that with the right people, I can make this happen
Mm-hmm.
without selling the farm. You know, and so that mindset is there. So like this is why I say everybody needs to understand what it's like to be a producer,
Mm-hmm.
because producers are going through so much just to bring this to the stage, and it's often thankless.
Now, interesting you bring that up, and I know we don't have a significant amount of time left on the podcast.
Just today
So,
we have a whole podcast.
right, but I'm saying, but we may have to re-bring it up. But I
Yes.
mentioned to you today, I did go through a 5-hour audition
Hmm.
where I was on the casting side of it, side of the table, and I have a lot. And I mean, first of all, there were delightful people auditioning, many of which have superb talents. Um, the audition process went very smoothly. It was well organized. All that's good because that doesn't always happen, right? But I felt for these actors, I could not do what they do. It's a talent to itself. Some of them, I'm sure, are more talented than their audition shows them up to be.
Mm.
And there they are, standing there or sitting there, and I'm thinking, there's no one on this at this table who's going to pay them a living wage. And we're all, not me, but some of the people at the table are rich theater
Mm.
companies. And even if they follow the union rules and do the whole thing, so these people are there, and they are, one person said, oh, I called in sick to come to this audition because the only way I make enough money to live, I have to work for this financial company, and they won't give me the time off to audition, so I just call in sick.
Mm.
Right? That's not a good thing to do, but
No.
okay, good for her. She has finances. Another one said, the reason I don't work with such and such nonprofit, which is near my home, is because at this point in my life, I need money. I
Hmm.
can't afford to eat and pay rent. And I'm thinking, then what are you doing here? Because there's no one here who's going to give it to you. That you can get you can get a lead role, and you're not going to be able to. It can open and close in 4 weeks, right? And she was a wonderful actress. And I'm thinking, I didn't have a job at the moment for her, but I'm thinking this is someone I would trust with a role. So that's the sad side. I don't want to make it all terrible.
Hmm.
There's some people coming with joy and they just love what they do, and by the way, all these people had resumes where they did things. So
Yeah.
these weren't, why are you even in the business people? They get jobs.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very, very sad, difficult thing. And I found the people at the table with me to be significantly unfeeling. And again, I don't want to say everyone. This was a table of 6 people.
Mm-hmm.
I would say 3 of them, if it was up to them, they wouldn't have said a hello to these actors. They wouldn't acknowledge anything about them. They wouldn't have asked them us any questions off their resume to find out who they were as people. The rest of us had to carry the ball. And all of a sudden, when you hear something interesting, I saw these other 3 people, their eyes light up. Oh, it's something. Oh, look at this. They know how to do this. I didn't know because I didn't bother to look at their skill set on the resume. I didn't know he spoke Mandarin,
Mm-hmm.
right? And all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, it's right there in the resume. I'm going to ask, what, you speak Mandarin? Because it's stuck in there with kickboxing, right? As another skill set. Which one's more interesting at the moment? And all of a sudden, they have these amazing stories to tell you about shows they were in, where they used it, or when they traveled to Taiwan, and how they used it when they used to be in publishing instead of in acting. And
Mm-hmm.
you find out this is a human being with a full personality. And I saw all these people, their eyes light up. I'm thinking, where the hell were you if the other 3 of us weren't there?
Hmm.
And these actors are stuck with casting people. And some of my best friends are casting people. So I don't want to, it was just these 3 that were driving me crazy.
I'm not against casting agents. Some of my best friends are casting
But,
agents.
and they get really tired of listening. I get it. They get really tired. You see one after the other. But this is a well-run casting call.
Mm-hmm.
So I give the organizers great credit for that. But actors go to things that aren't well orchestrated. Sometimes they're sitting there waiting for an hour, 2 hours to be seen because people are late.
Yeah.
And nobody was there more than 5 minutes late during
Mm.
this casting call because the people out in the lobby were handling the business.
Well, and it's also crazy when you've got like 30 people coming in to audition for one part,
Mm-hmm.
and they're coming from all over too, because like once it's broadcasted everywhere they can find it, they're deciding for themselves. You want to make the trip from Maryland to Philly, or you want to drive
Oh,
all the way to New
absolutely.
York, or what about the universities who do their showcase in New York? Like that's a whole thing,
Right.
like to put them there. And then if the people who show up are not even interested, really, why are you here?
Right.
Just
But
to
that
get
but that's an important part, Darnell. And you know this. We're sitting here because we love what we may not love every minute of every day, but we do love what we're doing. We
yeah.
love being part of this, as do almost everybody we hang out with.
Hmm.
So why shouldn't we extend that great feeling of appreciation to people who are putting their lives on the line in front of us
Yeah.
to try to get a part that only 1 out of 30 or 50 are going to get? And again, another historical little tidbit. My second job on Broadway, first of all, casting directors did not exist in 1979.
Hmm.
Okay, there was no such thing. The directors did their own casting. So, as a production assistant in a producer's office, I was given a piece of paper and told, when an agent calls you and said, I have an actor who fits this role, I want the director to see them for it. My job was to assign a time and tell the agent where and when the audition was. Then on the audition days, the director and myself, sometimes the producer, if he had time, would go to the audition room, wherever it was. We would see these people. I was the monitor. And then at the end of the 3 or 4 days, either the director could cast the whole show or he couldn't, or she couldn't, whatever. It was both. That very different process. Now, of course, we have cattle calls, and there were cattle calls in those days too. but there weren't union rules in New York requiring that you see a certain number of people,
Mm.
even if you've already cast the role. Equity does protect its members by saying you must have general auditions and interviews so that people get to talk to you. You get to know that if you want a red haired actor who's 37, here's one that exists to put in your records. If you're never interested in a red-headed 37-year-old, you can throw the resume out, but at least you met them.
Mm.
And that did not exist when I started.
Yeah.
So that protection is in place. On the other hand, now we need casting directors who go and do the filtering before the director sees it.
Yeah.
So again, the director doesn't know there's a redhead 37-year-old that maybe ought to get the part because he wasn't thinking that that might be appropriate.
And sometimes the people who are sort of tasked to weed out, the thin it out so that our time is maximized. They might miss something, or they might just make a choice because they have some authority to just cut somebody that would have
Yeah,
been useful.
devil's advocate, but that's true
Yeah.
with directors
Mhm.
also. And you can't see everybody. So, and as they say, the casting job, these people, when they're good, they're phenomenal. They really are.
Yeah.
So this is not me kissing butt. I have seen these people who can see right through whether someone's bad audition is something that you should discount and see them again for a callback. They
Yeah.
really get this stuff. So I want to give
Hmm.
both kudos and it's a horrible job sometimes,
Hmm.
but it's a very different process that we go into. Bringing back to marketing, we now have the internet, we have bloggers. We didn't used to have that. Things have changed.
Hmm.
So, how do we make it better? And that's where we started the discussion. And and I still wonder why we're not all talking to each other.
Exactly. There's always something, and that's the business of theater, a working title. I'm Darnell Radford,
Mitch Weiss,
and we'll see you at the theater.
yay.